I'm going to start tonight by issuing my own symbolic sanctions against the two most damaging figures in the Albanese government, the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister. I sanction Wong and Albanese for their antagonistic and extreme rhetoric, which over the past 20 months has only inflamed anti-Israel sentiment and contributed to the dangerous rise of antisemitism in our country. They stand condemned. There can be no genuine social cohesion while our nation's leadership continues to pander to rabid activists who hate Israel. Because it's clear that the anti-Israel protest movement has been the key driver of the violence, doxing and harassment of Jewish Australians. Wong and Albanese, in my view, are as dangerous to Australia's social fabric as the very Israeli ministers they hypocritically sanctioned overnight. Now, of course, my sanctions will make no difference, just like theirs won't make a difference to the Israeli ministers they've sanctioned, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. But what matters is the message it sends. And the message from the Albanese government is this: if you support Israel, you're the problem. Now, we all know that you don't issue sanctions against a friend. You only issue them against an enemy like Russia. And thus, the Albanese government is turning Israel into a pariah state, and thus Zionists into outcasts. Around 99% of Jews are Zionists, so this is extremely dangerous for our social cohesion. And their move to issue sanctions is juvenile. It's student union-style political activism. It's not considered foreign policy, but it does have serious implications. It'll drive division and distrust. It'll fuel fear amongst Israelis. And I believe it'll increase hatred of Jews. Thankfully, there is still leadership and common sense, if only from the United States. The impressive Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, was clear-headed and principled when he said this today. He said the sanctions do not advance US-led efforts to achieve a ceasefire, bring all hostages home and end the war. He says we reject any notion of equivalence. Hamas is a terror organisation that committed unspeakable atrocities, continues to hold innocent civilian hostages, and prevents the people of Gaza from living in peace. He said we remind our partners not to forget who the real enemy is. Because Wong and Albanese have certainly forgotten who the enemy is. And Marco Rubio said that the United States now urges the reversal of these sanctions. He said America stands shoulder to shoulder with Israel. Now, I've been told, and I hope it's true, that President Donald Trump plans to raise this issue with Albanese when he sees him at the G7 shortly. But let's be clear. This move by the Albanese government today is fundamentally flawed, and it's wrong for three main reasons. It's gross double standards, it abuses the purpose of the sanction regime, and it contributes to an unwise, broader anti-Israel foreign policy campaign. And let's start with that gross double standard. There are no sanctions on Palestinian ministers, despite their repeated incitement and glorification of violence. And this includes the Palestinian president, Mahmoud Abbas, who defended Hitler, saying that the Nazi leader didn't kill Jews because of their religion, but because of their social role in how they dealt with money.
وقال إنه اليهود يعني حارب اليهود لأنهم كانوا يعملون على أساس إنه لا سامية والسامية لا توجد هنا.
And just this year, the Palestinian president also said that he won't stop the payments to so-called martyrs' families. That's the families of terrorists who kill innocent Israelis. Well, wouldn't Penny Wong think this was the greatest obstacle to peace, funding terrorism, and it's this that requires sanctions? Well, apparently not. In fact, the Palestinian president even made a phone call congratulating a terrorist who murdered an Israeli baby. Have a listen. That Israeli baby, Avia Malka, was just 9 months old. And here's another example. The Palestinian advisor on religious affairs and Islamic relations, Mahmoud al-Habash, said that Hamas's massacre of October 7 was legitimate resistance.
ما قامت به حماس يوم 7 أكتوبر. نعم. بدي أفترض إنه مقاومة مشروعة. نعم. وإحنا اتفقنا من البداية إنه المقاومة مشروعة. نعم. ولا حدا بيقدر يغبر على مشروعية المقاومة. ما حدث يوم 7 أكتوبر أمر مشروع. تمام؟ نفترض إنه أمر مشروع. طيب.
Now, there are so many examples like this, too many for me to go through now. Yet Wong and Albanese have chosen to sanction two controversial Israeli ministers who've committed no crime and who are regularly criticised in Israel's free press. They're criticised for comments calling on Israel to take back control of Gaza. They say the Palestinians should move out, and they encourage Israeli settlements in Palestinian areas. Now, clearly, these are not comments I agree with. You know, because you know my views, I express them here every night. I don't agree with them. But it's hardly comparable to literally paying for terrorism or congratulating the murderer of an innocent 9-month-old baby. And it's certainly not comparable to actual crimes committed by any number of politicians around the world. Ben Gvir and Smotrich also face elections and judicial oversight. The Israeli democracy is famously fierce, and the law is upheld. But no such accountability exists in the Palestinian Authority, which has not held elections in over a decade. If this were about principles, not politics, where are the sanctions on Palestinian Authority ministers? And where are the sanctions outside of the Middle East on officials from Myanmar, China, or Iran? Or for that matter, on politicians who have said equally controversial comments in America, Canada, France, Germany, or any country around the world. By this standard, Albanese and Wong would almost certainly be issuing sanctions against the United States president. I mean, this is utterly absurd. And it brings me to my next point. This very move abuses the purpose of the sanctions regime. The Magnitsky legislation, under which these sanctions are issued, was designed to target authoritarian regimes, places where there's no rule of law, justice system, or even elections. This sanction regime was the impetus of the late Senator Kimberley Kitching. It was a mechanism to hold dictators and corrupt autocrats accountable. Now, as I first reported in the Australian newspaper, Kimberley Kitching fought for this, despite opposition from Penny Wong, who refused to let her table a private member's bill on the Magnitsky laws. Now, Kimberley's close friend, former Labor MP Michael Danby, he's going to be on the show tonight. I spoke to him today, and he says that Kimberley Kitching would be turning in her grave right now to see these sanctions abused in this way, to be used on our ally, Israel. Michael Danby says Kimberley envisaged this legislation being used against authoritarian states, and she'd be upset that it was being misused against democratic states like Israel, where the rule of law and elections deal with any possible violations by local politicians. He says, what's next? If we don't like the politicians in other democratic states like Canada, France, or the United States, are we going to put Magnitsky bans on them too? And as I said, Michael Danby is coming up on the show a bit later. But Shadow Foreign Affairs Minister Michaelia Cash also said today that this sanctions regime is meant to respond to human rights abuses and terrorist acts. She says the government's explanatory materials make clear that Minister Wong exercised a discretionary power to impose the sanctions because of public comments made by the two Israeli ministers. This appears to be a new development in our foreign policy. Yes, public comments, not crimes, not actions, but comments. These are sanctions for speech. It's bewildering. And Michaela Cash will be on the program tomorrow night. Now, this isn't about justice. It's political punishment against freely elected ministers in a functioning democracy with an independent Supreme Court. Now, lastly, as we all know, this isn't an isolated incident. It's part of an established pattern under the Albanese government of adopting a hostile, anti-Israel foreign policy platform. Before Albanese, Israel was one of Australia's closest allies. This government is treating Israel as a rogue enemy state. AJAC Executive Director Colin Rubenstein said it very well today in a statement when he said the government appears to be acting at the behest of the obsessive anti-Israel activists who constantly scream for ever more punitive actions against Israel and largely do not seek the two-state solution our government says it supports, but instead desire Israel's ultimate destruction. And that's right, that's the crowd they're pandering to. Now, Penny Wong stood up today and she claimed that she could separate her foreign policy position on Israel from Jewish Australians. She said the two were unrelated. Now, this is a farcical, naive and simply wrong claim that indicates she knows nothing of the racism we're facing and the reasons behind it. What Penny Wong must surely know is that the Jewish community around the world is intrinsically connected to the state of Israel. Zionism and Judaism are intertwined. Israel is the only Jewish state in the world. It's the ancestral homeland of the Jewish people who've lived there for thousands of years and even lived there before Islam began. The Albanese government's egregious and continued campaign against Israel is a massive betrayal. And it's my view, my very real fear, that it only encourages the campaign of hate towards Israel, towards Israelis, towards Zionists, and thus towards Jews. It sends a signal that in their Australia, vilifying Israel is not just tolerated, it's applauded. Now, this entire move by Wong and Albanese is divisive, counterproductive, and deeply hypocritical. But it won't go unanswered. The Jewish community and many Australians, including many of you watching now, see exactly what this is: a political stunt wrapped in moral posturing, doing real damage to the social fabric of our great country.